My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, you know what's scary? Heart disease. Yeah, I was reading up on what they call silent killers. They just creep up on you and they take your life. Heart disease actually is the leading cause of death for men in the United States currently. According to the American Heart Association, 1 in 4 men die of heart disease every year. 1 in 4. It's a silent killer because the symptoms, the early stage symptoms that is, are often unnoticed. They go unnoticed. Like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and a family history of heart disease. Those are things people don't typically feel. They just end up having it, and then it leads to their demise. What's scarier than that? How about the Antichrist? As we know, Al-Masih al-Dajjal. The companions, one day they were sitting together and they were talking about the Antichrist, Ad-Dajjal. And many of us are familiar with that character. It's like a one-eyed monster almost. And what the Dajjal is to do is to lead mankind astray, using trickery and deception, causing the faithful to leave their faith. And we ask Allah's protection. And it's a very interesting topic because it is so scary, so spooky. It's like telling jinn stories for a lot of people. Like watching horror movies for some reason. There's this intrigue about it because of the scary nature of such a thing. And the companions, they were talking about it one day. Talking about Al-Masih al-Dajjal. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he came among those companions and he said, أَلَا أُخْبِرُكُمْ بِمَا هُوَ أَخْوَفُ عَلَيْكُمْ عِنْدِي مِنَ الْمَسِيحِ الدَّجَّالِ. Should I tell you something I'm more afraid of for you than Al-Masih al-Dajjal, the Antichrist? Something scarier than the Antichrist, which means scarier than heart disease, the cause of death, cause of the death for the human heart. And they said to him, of course, tell us, what's scarier, if you will? What are you more afraid of than the Antichrist? He said, Ash-shirk al-khafi, silent or hidden shirk. What is that? A lot of us know the word shirk as associating partners with Allah, worshiping other gods, worshiping stones and statues and rocks and trees like they used to do in the days of old. And that was during that time, the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when Mecca was filled with idols and most of the people that lived there were idolaters. They worshipped those things. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't afraid for this ummah that they would return back to worshiping idols, as was reported in another hadith narrated by Imam Ahmad in his collection Al-Musnad. But what he was afraid of was this silent killer, which is, as he alayhi salatu wasalam says, أن يقوم الرجل يصلي فيزين الصلاة لما يرى من نظر رجل. He stands for prayer, and then he begins to perfect that prayer, beautifying the prayer, completing its obligations and adding to it with the recommended acts, standing so straight, bowing so perfectly, prostrating so long, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he does that because there are people around watching. He was motivated by people looking upon him in an act of righteousness. What is this silent killer of a disease? It's not a physical disease. It's not have to do with the physical heart, but it has to do with the spiritual heart, and this is what is called Riyaa. Riyaa, according to the great Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, in a very, very clear definition, says it is when a person performs an act of righteousness or worship with the intention to show off to people in order that he can be praised. That it can be said about them, MashaAllah, prays so much, stands for so long, gives from his wealth like he doesn't fear poverty, so involved. The intention is to receive those compliments and to receive that praise. And this disease of Riyaa, this silent killer, kills the faithful's deeds by rendering them void. Whatever reward you thought you were getting by praying, and the Prophet ﷺ, he told us of many rewards of prayer. Whether you're praying in congregation or fulfilling your obligatory prayers, adding to it with voluntary prayers, all of the rewards that were promised, if you're doing it for those around you, then those rewards, they're lost. And it's even worse than that. It can take the actual deed that you are doing, if you are now doing it for someone else besides Allah, and turn that action against you. When you thought it was a righteous deed, it can turn it against you, so it is a fault and not a praiseworthy action, believe it or not. Think about the pinnacle of sacrifice. The pinnacle of sacrifice in Islam is to give your life. Think about the pinnacle of leadership is to be a scholar, to be a person of the Quran, or a leader when it comes to building the ummah, giving your wealth. All very, very highly praised and rewarded actions. And the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke of these three types and how their deeds can actually work against them. And he said that the first of people against whom judgment will be pronounced on the day of resurrection, the first will be a martyr. Someone who lost their life serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave the ultimate sacrifice. And that man will be brought, and Allah will make known to him the blessings that he was given. And the man will acknowledge those blessings. And then Allah will ask him, what did you do with those blessings? And he will say, well, I fought in your cause until I was martyred. And Allah will say, you have lied. You have lied. But you fought so that people would say that you were brave. You gave your life so that people would mention your name among the courageous. And guess what? That's exactly what you got. He said, and it was said as you desired. You were after something of this world, and you received exactly that. And then it will be ordered that that man be dragged along his face and thrown into the hellfire. The next to be brought is a scholar, someone who studied the Quran, who obtained religious knowledge, recited the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was brought in front of Allah, and Allah did the same thing. He reminded him of the blessings he received, and the man acknowledged those blessings, and he said, what did you do with the blessings I gave you? And he said, I studied and obtained religious knowledge, and I recited the Quran for your sake. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, you have lied. But you obtained that knowledge so that you could be called a scholar. And you recited the book of Allah so eloquently so that it can be said of you, he's a great reciter. And that's exactly what happened. He was called a scholar, and he was a reciter, and then it would be ordered that he be dragged along his face and thrown into the fire. The last of those three is a man who was blessed with great wealth, and he gave that wealth hand over fist. There was no end to his charitable contribution. He gave and gave and gave like no one could imagine. And when it was time for his judgment, he was brought before Allah, and Allah asked him the same series of questions. He reminded him of his blessings until the man acknowledged them and asked, "What did you do with those blessings?" And he said, "There was not a project or a mission for your cause except that I gave my wealth to support it. Any and every opportunity that furthered your cause, I spent my money for your sake." And Allah will say, "You have lied. But what you did do was spend that money so that people would call you generous, so that people would praise your generosity." And the same thing ended up happening to what we assumed was a very God-fearing and generous man. He was dragged along his face and cast into the hellfire. Reported in Sahih Muslim. Brothers and sisters, the hadith here illustrates for us the power of intention. The power of intention, and intention occurs in the heart. Where are your hearts? That's something that you have to constantly gauge, constantly look after. The most difficult thing to manage is the intention. And this was the complaint of many of the companions and the righteous that came before us, was to manage that intention while it was flipping from one side to the next, to hold it steady, to hold it firm, directed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Intention shapes the value of actions. It's all about what you're doing it for. Very famously noted, the great Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu reported a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam saying, "Innama al-a'malu bin-niyya," that the actions are by their intention. وَإِنَّمَا لِمْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, that everyone will have what they intended. You will receive what you intended. If you intend something of this life, if you're after something of this world, more than likely Allah will open the doors and you will receive that in some form or fashion at some time or another. If you intend with your actions the reward and the pleasure, the grace of Allah and His forgiveness, then He's ready and willing and capable of all things. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he says, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Whoever migrates for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, then the migration will be counted for that. It's done for Allah. It's done for His Messenger. And this is referring to the migration from Mecca to Al-Madinah. He said, وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ إِمْرَأَةٍ يَتَزَوَّجُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. If he made the migration for the world, some worldly benefit, whether it was a job or simply to relocate for a better view, or as he says, to get married, because this was the specific context. There was someone that did this. They moved from Mecca to Al-Madinah not because it was a command, but because of a woman. And we can get caught up a lot of times doing such things for other people, motivated by others, looking for their approval, looking for their acceptance, when what we're really after is the acceptance and the approval of Allah. When we work righteousness for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will provide us with a great reward. And if we're after something else of this world, He will have nothing to provide for us in the next. We'll surrender it all. If your intention with the righteous good works is to achieve something of this life, you surrender the reward of the hereafter. You hand it over. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Riyaa, يقول الله عز وجل لهم يوم القيامة. Talking about this disease, Riyaa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell them on the day of resurrection, إِذَا جُزِيَ النَّاسُ بِأَعْمَالِهِمْ. When the people are being compensated for their deeds, when people are taking their reward, He will say, اذهبوا إلى الذين كنتم تراعون في الدنيا. Go to those people that you're showing off to. هل تجدون عندهم جزاء? Will you find reward with them? يوم القيامة. Everyone you showed off to, you'll be told, go get the reward from them, because that's what you wanted. That's what you were after. You were seeking status, fame. You were seeking praise. You wanted your name to be mentioned. You wanted to have a reputation. You wanted to be called this, that, or the other. Go see now, Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day when the only reward is from Allah, and see what it is they can provide. Brothers and sisters, because so much is at stake. There's just so much at stake. Forget heart disease. I mean, don't forget heart disease. But don't lose sight of your spiritual heart for the physical. We're all going to die, whether it's because of heart disease or something else, but the true test is going to happen in the hereafter. You can't sacrifice that for the material. And because so much is at stake, and we're talking about your years of righteous works, your years of suffering and sacrificing, of giving, it's hanging in the balance. And it all is right there. It's all right here. Which way is it leaning? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to safeguard our deeds. To safeguard and to preserve our deeds. He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُبْطِلُوا صَدَقَاتِكُمْ بِالْمَنِّ وَالْأَذَى. Do not render your acts of charity void by reminder and by harming others. You know, there's nothing worse than giving in charity, giving a donation, contributing to a cause, and then turning around and reminding of that contribution. Or irritating people with it, expecting something from it. Hey, remember when I gave you what you were asking for? I need a seat at the table. Or look at me, everybody, remember when I did such and how great that was. These simple things, sometimes we do it and we're not even conscious of it, because really deep down we're looking for something. We're looking for some instant gratification. And Allah says they will be void, that act. Just like كَالَّذِي يُنْفِقُ مَالَهُ رِيَاءَ النَّاسِ, like the one who spends their money showing off to people. وَلَا يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ صَفْوَانٍ عَلَيْهِ تُرَابٌ فَأَصَابَهُ وَابِلٌ فَتَرَكَهُ صَلْدًا لَا يَقْدِرُونَ عَلَى شَيْءٍ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. He says this is like the one who spends his wealth to be seen of men. He wants to show off. Like this type, and he does not believe in Allah nor the last day. He's not thinking about the reward of Allah. He's not thinking about the recompense on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Here is where you need to focus. Because Allah draws a parable between a rock and a heart. And the reality is sometimes the heart can be a rock, as hard and as stubborn as that. He says his likeness is the likeness of a smooth rock on which is dust. Dust has covered the rock. On it falls heavy rain, which leaves it bare. They are not able to do anything with what they have earned. And Allah does not guide the disbelieving people. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is prohibiting the believers from rendering their deeds in vain by reminding people of what they've done, annoying them by it, or showing off. And in this parable, you can see about the smooth rock. The rock is like the heart of one who shows off. It's hard, it's impenetrable. And that layer of dust on top of it represent the good deeds that they're doing. It looks like fertile soil. It looks like fertile ground. A person that prays showing off or out of Riyaa, it looks as if all is well. They're doing this, that, and the other. When the reality is that, like he says, when the rain falls, the heart becomes exposed for what it truly is. Nothing but a hard rock. No good deeds at all. And what has washed away those deeds is a lack of sincerity. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه. نصلي ونسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن خير الزاد التقوى. My dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Bayyinah, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. And they were not commanded except to worship Allah, being sincere to Him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering us to be sincere, seeking His reward, His acknowledgement, His acceptance, and none other. When we turn away from that sincerity, we are turning away from Allah. And when we turn away from Allah, He will turn away from us. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, قال الله تبارك وتعالى أنا أغنى الشركاء عن الشرك من عمل عملا أشرك في معي غيري تركته والشرك. Allah says in this hadith Qudsi that I am the least in need of a partner. I am least in need of a partner. If any one of you does something associating someone else with me in it, I shall abandon you with them. I will leave you to that action and to that person, thing, or whatever it may be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need our worship in the first place. He doesn't need our prayers. It's as if sometimes, I think, we feel like we're doing something special for Allah. Giving Him food or drink through prayer or sustenance or something, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. No. We're not, as if what we do, we're now indebted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need our praise. He doesn't need our prayers. He doesn't need our fasting. It's an opportunity for us. Brothers and sisters, the reality is that pure intentions come from pure hearts. And if the heart's sick, then likely the intention will be sick in some way. It's very possible. It's very possible, like the physical heart. There are symptoms, there are things that lead up to it becoming ill. Riyaa is a disease which requires a great struggle, a great deal of endurance to get over and to overcome. So there are a couple of things to cure the heart of this disease there is a two-pronged approach. How can you remove Riyaa from your heart? There's two-pronged approach. One of them, the first, is to attack Riyaa at its roots. Right? As opposed to just looking at the symptoms, you go straight for the disease itself. The root of Riyaa is love of status and fame. That's where it all starts. Showing off is because there's something in you that wants status or fame to be recognized. And then there are symptoms to that. Number one is the delight of being praised. Like when a person stands for prayer so that they can say, wow, mashallah, what a devoted worshiper. Or they're trying to avoid blame. So what that means is you do something to avoid being called out. I don't want to feel uncomfortable because I don't pray. But when I'm around people that do and it's time for prayer, I jump in the line because I don't want them to say something to me after it's all over. Why aren't you praying? I didn't do it for the sake of Allah. I did it because I wanted to escape that whole conversation that's making me feel a little uncomfortable. Participation medal, please. Or you have a desire for what other people have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives people certain things, raises some above others, and maybe you think by doing what they do, you will achieve what they achieved. And so you embark upon righteousness in order to achieve that status. Like learning the Quran so that you can be the next Abdul Basit. No, I want to be Abdul Basit. I want people to tune in all over the world. I want people to make the takbirat when I'm reciting. Salli ala Nabi. I want to hear that. And so I begin to recite and memorize and beautify and perfect for that. Because I want to achieve the same status. And the next approach, so this really has to do with before you begin an act, that you deal with that desire of fame and status. The next prong on this two-pronged approach, if we will, this course of medicine is to buckle down while you are in the middle of worship. Buckle down by removing any thoughts of showing off. And those creep in when you know people are watching you. You know that people are sitting there watching you. Or sometimes you get excited thinking that perhaps by doing this, those around me, they'll say something nice and praise me. Or I will achieve something by this. In the middle of worship, those thoughts can creep into your mind. They can seep into your heart and they can ruin your intention. And so the idea is to sever the very first before it leads on to the second. And you should be telling yourself at that moment, what does the person next to me have to do with my hereafter? What do they have to do with me? Whether they see me or they don't see me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows my condition. Whether I'm in public or I'm in private, Allah is there. He is well aware and well acquainted with what it is that I do or what it is that I do not do. If you can't get past that and it kind of sneaks on to number two where you're looking for that praise, you're looking for acceptance, you want to be recognized, then you need to go further than remember the martyr, the scholar, and the generous. And what was their outcome? Their outcome was they ended up in the worst of worst places. And that's scary. Because all of that happened more than likely from a silent killer. Just like heart disease, you were waiting for some feeling, you were waiting for some warning, you were waiting for some alert, but guess what? Sometimes things happen to the heart and we don't even know that they're going on. You can't sit back and wait, but you have to be proactive. And these are just a few tips and religious recommendations on how to rid the heart of what is a truly silent killer. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our hearts from any diseases and to rid them of sickness. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب